You look in the mirror, you brush your teeth, you check your skin. You completely ignore the two wet, fluid-filled orbs embedded in your skull. You assume they are just biological cameras, passively recording, helping you walk, translating light so you don't trip over the furniture. But that assumption is a fatal physiological illusion. If you step closer to the glass and stare directly into your own pupils, you will not just see your reflection. You will see a live, unedited, high-definition broadcast of your impending biological failure. Clinical neuro-ophthalmology reveals that your eyes are not just sensory organs. They are literally exposed pieces of your brain pushed outward during embryonic development. They are the absolute only transparent windows into your central nervous system and your vascular highway. By learning how to read the hidden gray rings, the microscopic broken blood vessels, and the subtle, terrifying color shifts in your eyes, you can instantly detect massive cardiovascular decay, silent liver failure, and severe neurological collapse decades before a surgeon ever has to use a scalpel. You possess a biological dashboard, and today, you are going to learn how to decode the alarms. The physical sensation begins before you even open them. You wake up. The alarm is blaring. Your eyelids feel heavy, stiff, and violently glued together. You rub them aggressively, assuming you just need a cup of coffee and a hot shower. But the sharp, gritty friction you feel beneath your fingertips is not just sleepiness. It is a severe mechanical warning. Your lacrimal glands, the tiny biological factories responsible for secreting a highly complex, three-layered tear film, are stalling out. Your immune system might be quietly launching an unprovoked attack on your moisture-producing glands, a condition known as Sjogren's syndrome, causing your joints to ache with a dull, throbbing pain every time you stand up. But dry eyes are merely surface-level friction. To understand the true catastrophic potential hiding in your skull, we have to push past the cornea, travel through the pupil, and look at the actual living tissue on the back wall of your eye. Welcome to the retina. The retina is a marvel of biological engineering, but it holds a terrifying distinction in the human body. It is the absolute only place where a physician can look through a lens and see your bare, living blood vessels actively pulsing with the rhythm of your heart. When you live a life of chronic stress, poor sleep, and a highly processed diet, your blood pressure slowly, inevitably rises. You do not feel this happening in your arms or your chest. It is a silent pressure cooker. But the tiny, fragile capillaries inside your retina feel every single ounce of that mechanical violence. The optometrist leaned back, pulled the harsh, bright light away from the patient's face, and let out a long, heavy sigh. "You didn't come here to get a new prescription for your reading glasses," she said, her voice dropping to a somber, urgent register. "You need to go to the emergency room right now. Your blood pressure is so violently high that your retinas are actively bleeding into your skull." What that doctor saw was a condition called hypertensive retinopathy. As the high-pressure blood smashes against the delicate endothelial walls of the retinal arteries, the body panics. It attempts to reinforce the pipes by thickening the vessel walls, turning them from soft, pliable tubes into rigid, hardened pipes. Optometrists call this silver wiring. The blood vessels physically look like stiff metal wire reflecting the light, but the pressure keeps building. Eventually, the microscopic pipes burst. Tiny, flame-shaped hemorrhages erupt across the back of the eye. Your brain receives less oxygen, causing a subtle, persistent, dull ache at the base of your neck. You think you just slept on your pillow wrong, but your internal plumbing is actually rupturing. And yet, the rupture of these tiny vessels is nothing compared to the slow, crystalline suffocation caused by a completely different metabolic crisis. You are sitting at a restaurant, trying to read the menu. The letters look slightly blurry, floating in and out of focus. A few hours later, after you eat a massive, carbohydrate-heavy meal, your vision mysteriously clears up. You assume your eyes are just tired. This is a massive, life-threatening misunderstanding. The blurriness is not a problem with the lens of your eye. It is a catastrophic fluctuation in the physical density of your blood. When you have uncontrolled blood sugar, massive amounts of glucose flood your circulatory system. Glucose molecules are not smooth. At a microscopic level, they are sharp, jagged, crystalline structures. As these sugar crystals are forced through the microscopic capillaries of your macula, the tiny, hypersensitive center of your retina responsible for your sharpest vision, they act like microscopic shards of glass. They violently scrape and destroy the inner walls of the blood vessels. The vessels become leaky, seeping fluid and fat directly into your retinal tissue. Your body, desperate to save your sight, aggressively tries to build brand new blood vessels to bypass the damage. But these new vessels are built in a panic. They are incredibly fragile. They instantly burst, filling the clear, gelatinous fluid of your eye with dark, floating clouds of blood. This is diabetic retinopathy. It is the leading cause of blindness in adults, and it is happening silently, while you blame the blurry menu on bad lighting. But you do not always need a high-powered microscope to see the biological alarms. Sometimes, the warning is painted across the largest, most visible canvas of your face. Look at the white part of your eye. It is called the sclera. Evolutionary biologists believe that human beings are the only primates on Earth with wide, bright white scleras. In the brutal environment of the prehistoric plains, this was a massive survival advantage. The white background allowed early human hunters to silently signal the direction of their gaze to their tribe mates without making a sound, coordinating lethal ambush attacks on prey. The stark white of your eye is a genetic masterpiece of nonverbal communication. But when that stark white begins to turn a sickly, muddy shade of yellow, it is communicating a biological disaster. Deep inside your abdomen, your liver acts as a massive, heavy-duty chemical refinery. One of its primary jobs is to filter out dead, exhausted red blood cells. When these cells are dismantled, they produce a toxic, bright yellow byproduct called bilirubin. A healthy liver aggressively filters this bilirubin out of your blood and dumps it into your digestive tract to be eliminated. But if your liver is failing, if it is suffocating under a layer of toxic visceral fat, or if it is being destroyed by chronic alcohol abuse or a viral hepatitis infection, the factory shuts down. The bilirubin has nowhere to go. It begins backing up into your bloodstream. It floods your circulatory system, searching for a place to deposit itself, and it finds the pure white canvas of your sclera. This yellowing is called scleral icterus, a severe form of jaundice. You do not just see it, you feel it. In the marrow of your bones, a profound, unshakable fatigue anchors you to your bed. Your skin begins to itch with a terrible, crawling sensation because the bile salts are depositing themselves directly under your dermis. You look in the mirror and see the yellow eyes of a dying liver, desperately begging you to stop the toxic intake before it crosses the point of no return. But the yellow stain is an obvious alarm. What happens when the danger presents itself as a beautifully perfect, opaque ring surrounding your iris? You might be brushing your teeth one morning and notice a distinct, light gray or whitish-blue ring forming around the outer edge of your colored iris. It looks almost like a halo. It does not affect your vision. It does not hurt. You might even think it makes your eyes look unique. But if you are under the age of 45, that halo is a harbinger of a massive cardiovascular event. This ring is clinically known as arcus senilis. It is not a pigmentation change. It is a massive, overflowing garbage dump of fat. When your bloodstream is chronically overloaded with low-density lipoproteins, the highly inflammatory, toxic cholesterol that tears apart your arteries, the fat eventually runs out of places to hide. It begins to leak out of the blood vessels and deposits itself directly into the periphery of your cornea. You are literally watching your cholesterol slowly suffocating the clear window of your eye. And if that fat is depositing itself in your cornea, you can be absolutely certain it is also packing itself aggressively into the coronary arteries, feeding your heart muscle. You will feel a subtle, burning tightness in your chest when you walk up a flight of stairs. You will feel a heavy, dull ache radiating down your left arm when you are stressed. The halo in your eye is the exact same biological rust that is preparing to trigger a massive, fatal heart attack. But sometimes the ring isn't gray. Sometimes a bizarre glowing ring of rusty brown or bright copper physically encircles the outer edge of your cornea. You might think it is a beautiful, rare genetic mutation of your eye color, but it is actually a lethal heavy metal poisoning happening from the inside out. This is known as a Kayser-Fleischer ring. It is the absolute hallmark of Wilson's disease, a rare genetic flaw where your liver completely loses the ability to filter out dietary copper. The copper builds up, highly toxic, and completely unregulated. It spills into your bloodstream, rusting your internal organs. It deposits heavily in the cornea, creating that golden ring. But the physical terror of this disease happens when the copper deposits directly into the basal ganglia of your brain. The physical sensation is horrifying. Your personality begins to violently change. You experience sudden, unexplainable bouts of severe psychosis and paranoia. Your hands develop a bizarre, wing-beating tremor that you cannot consciously stop. Your liver is dying, your brain is rusting, and the only visible warning is a beautiful copper ring shining in the light of your eye. Yet, the blood vessels and the physical tissue of the eye are only half of the story. The true terrifying power of the eye lies in the black, empty void sitting dead in the center of your iris. The pupil looks like a black dot, but it is not a physical structure. It is literally a hole. It is an empty aperture leading directly into the dark, fluid-filled chamber of your skull. And the size of that hole is controlled by a relentless, invisible tug-of-war between two massive branches of your central nervous system. This brings us to a massive, culturally reinforced misconception that completely blinds us to our own neurology. You have likely been taught that your pupils only change size based on how much light is in the room. If it is dark, they open. If it is bright, they close. You might also believe the romantic myth that dilated pupils simply mean someone is physically attracted to you. The scientific reality is infinitely more complex and vastly more dangerous. While light is a factor, your pupillary response is primarily driven by your cognitive load and your autonomic nervous system. Your sympathetic nervous system, the ancient fight-or-flight pathway, controls the dilator muscles. When you are terrified, when you are in extreme pain, or when your brain is struggling to solve a massively complex mathematical equation, your brain floods with adrenaline. This adrenaline forcefully yanks the pupils wide open, trying to absorb as much visual information as possible to help you survive the perceived threat. Conversely, your parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest pathway, controls the sphincter muscles that shrink the pupil down, calming the system. Your pupils are a real-time, live-action gauge of exactly how much psychological and physiological stress your brain is currently enduring. But what happens when the two pupils stop communicating? You look in the mirror, and your right pupil is the size of a tiny pinhead, but your left pupil is blown massively wide open, swallowing almost the entire iris. This is a condition called anisocoria, and it is a neurological code red. "I thought she was just exhausted from the long drive," the husband whispered, his voice trembling in the harsh fluorescent light of the intensive care unit. "She said she had a severe headache, the worst of her life. But when she looked at me, her left pupil was completely blown wide open, like a black hole. That was the moment I knew her brain was bleeding." A suddenly blown pupil that does not react to light is often the very first external sign of a massive, silent disaster happening deep inside the brain. It could be a brain aneurysm, a weak, ballooning spot on a cerebral artery that is swelling rapidly. As the aneurysm balloons outward, it physically presses against the third cranial nerve, the exact nerve responsible for sending the signal to constrict the pupil. The pressure crushes the nerve. The signal is violently cut off. The pupil drifts wide open, paralyzed in the dark. It is the biological equivalent of a fire alarm being violently ripped off the wall. The physical sensation is agonizing. You will feel a sudden thunderclap headache that drops you to your knees, accompanied by a stiff, rigid neck and an overwhelming wave of nausea as the intracranial pressure crushes your delicate brain tissue. But sometimes, the brain is not failing. Sometimes, The body is actively trying to push the eyes completely out of the skull. You might notice that over a period of months, your eyes seem to be getting larger. You look constantly surprised. The whites of your eyes are visible completely above your colored iris. You might think you are just losing weight in your face, but this is not an aesthetic change. This is a brutal, hyper-aggressive autoimmune attack known as Graves' disease. Your immune system, confused by a genetic glitch or extreme chronic stress, begins producing rogue antibodies. These antibodies bypass the normal targets and specifically attack the thyroid gland in your neck, forcing it to pump out lethal, toxic levels of thyroid hormone. Your metabolism is violently whipped into a frantic, chaotic overdrive. But these rogue antibodies also share a terrifying cross-reactivity. They specifically hunt down and attack the soft tissue, fat, and extraocular muscles sitting directly behind your eyeball. As the immune system attacks this tissue, massive, aggressive inflammation sets in. The tissue behind your eye swells and physically expands inside the rigid, bony orbit of your skull. Because the bone cannot expand, the swollen tissue has nowhere to go but forward. It physically shoves your eyeballs outward, causing them to bulge terrifyingly from your face. The physical sensation of this disease is a waking nightmare. You are trapped in a body running at 100 miles per hour. Your resting heart rate spikes to 120 beats per minute while you are sitting still. You are drenched in sweat. Your hands tremble violently when you try to hold a glass of water. You cannot sleep, no matter how exhausted your muscles become. Your eyes are bulging because your entire biological engine is rapidly overheating and preparing to detonate. And then there is the mechanical glitch that almost every human being experiences, yet completely misunderstands. You are sitting at your desk, staring at a screen, and suddenly, your lower eyelid begins to rapidly, uncontrollably vibrate. It is a tiny, localized seizure. You rub it. You press your finger against it to force it to stop, but the moment you let go, it flutters violently again. This is clinical myokymia. Most people laugh it off as just a quirky sign that they need more sleep. But at a microscopic level, myokymia is a desperate plea from an exhausted nervous system. When you consume massive amounts of caffeine while simultaneously suffocating under chronic psychological stress, your adrenal glands flood your body with cortisol and epinephrine. This massive chemical wave overstimulates the extremely delicate, hypersensitive motor nerves that control the orbicularis oculi, the circular muscle that wraps around your eye. Because you are severely lacking deep, restorative sleep, your body is completely depleted of magnesium, the specific mineral required to force a muscle cell to relax after it contracts. The muscle becomes locked in a chaotic firing loop. The physical reality of this twitch is that your central nervous system is violently misfiring. Your internal electrical grid is sparking, completely overwhelmed by the chemical stimulants you are using to force your exhausted body to remain conscious. As you pull back from the glass of the mirror, the sheer, staggering complexity of your own biology should completely reframe your reality. For your entire life, you have treated your eyes as passive observers. You bought them cheap sunglasses. You stared at blue light-emitting screens for 14 hours a day, and you assumed that as long as you could read the road signs while driving, your health was perfectly intact. You assumed that disease was something that happened deep in the dark, hidden cavities of your torso, invisible until it was too late. But human biology does not hide its failures. It broadcasts them. We evolved as incredibly complex, interconnected supersystems. The exact same endothelial cells that line the tiny capillaries in your retina are the exact same cells that line the massive coronary arteries, pumping blood to your heart. The exact same nerves that expand your pupil are the exact same nerves that regulate your breathing and your panic response. Your body cannot quarantine a metabolic disaster. When the liver fails, the eyes turn yellow. When the cholesterol overflows, the eyes form a halo. When the brain bleeds, the pupil goes dark. The eyes are the master dashboard of the human machine. But to actually utilize this biological dashboard, you must act with mechanical precision. You must never ignore a sudden, unexplainable shift in your vision, a persistent twitch in your eyelid, or a change in the symmetry of your pupils. The next time you feel a dull, throbbing pressure directly behind your eyes, do not just swallow a painkiller and go back to staring at a screen. That pressure is the physical sensation of your intraocular fluid failing to drain, a silent buildup that slowly crushes your optic nerve and leads to irreversible glaucoma. You must look closely, you must pay attention, and you must protect the windows, because the moment the dashboard goes dark, the machine is already broken.